please rise. Join us in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. Moines County Board of Supervisors, January 22nd, 2021. Are there any changes to the tentative agenda? Meet with department heads, elected officials, Moines County Auditor's Department.
Hello.
Sarah Doty.
Well, at this time, I'll speak for it.
Okay,
I'll
Terry
speak for
Johnson,
it.
Moines County Auditor. I didn't know what to say there for a minute.
Well, we're leaving today, and I figure if somebody has to type up the minutes, then she might as well conduct the meeting too, so. Anyway, but the auditor's office, we're just preparing for elections, for the city school elections, and we're just busy doing many other things in the office, so. That's
Thank
it.
you. I'll try not to mumble, Sarah.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Colin Gerst, IT.
Doing pretty good. Keeping busy, doing a little catch up. We were gone last week at our conference in Des Moines. Everything up there was pretty good. It was pretty security focused, so that was pretty interesting for me. We also did our external cybersecurity assessment with CISA. So I had about 2 days worth of fun on that, about 300 questions. So didn't take very long to get burnt out on that. But they're going to generate us a report and kind of graph us based off of other entities our size and other counties on like where we land in terms of vulnerability with cybersecurity. And so when I get that back, hopefully here sometime within the next couple of weeks, I'll sit down with you guys and go over that and see where the board feels comfortable being vulnerable in certain areas. But other than that, you know, just keep busy and trying to play catch up from last week.
Colin had one interruption last week. One of the supervisors, who shall remain unnamed and is speaking, clicked on a link that he shouldn't have clicked on, and as it turned out it was a test that I failed. But I took up the makeup exams right away and did very well on those.
Overall, with the monthly tests we push out, you know, we do really well. I mean, especially compared to a lot of other counties I talked to about, you know, some of those phishing tests. So, but yeah, I mean, there's certain folks in the county that are more susceptible than others.
Who shall remain unnamed?
Exactly.
Tommy doesn't have Bob to pick on him.
Thank you, Colin.
Yep.
Sheriff, Des Moines County Sheriff Kevin Clendenny.
Good morning. Things are going well at the sheriff's office. We have been pretty busy through the summer so far, but things are going good. The jail population's at 68. We just have 2 out of county, so numbers are good out there as well. Our Civil Service Commission met last night. They certified a list of 5 candidates for potential hire for future deputies, so we're glad to have that process, that testing process done and move forward with that. I thank the Civil Service Commission for their service on that board. It's a thankless job, but it's a very vital part of the process, so it's great. Sarah's actually the secretary for that board. Thank her for that as well too. We're finding lots of responsibilities for her. So.
Thanks, Kevin.
See on your Facebook page, you've been real busy.
Yes, we have. They're out there hammering it. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Brian Carter, Secondary Roads.
Good morning. I want to mention something real quick before I forget it on the DOT project north of Burlington. It sounds like the week of July 12th, they're going to shift traffic over and off of the current lanes and over onto some of the new lanes. It'll still be 2-lane traffic. But I wanted to mention that. That'll
What's the
be
date you said?
the week of July 12th. That was moved back. It was supposed to be before that, but I'm guessing some of the weather has pushed their schedule back. So wanted to pass that on. Even though it's not our project, it obviously has an impact on a lot of county residents. So
Brian, would that involve any of the crossover on Flint Bottom, or would that get back on the old highway still?
that will involve, I believe, some of the crossover. It's going to be I think, a fairly drastic change.
Okay.
It will take some, because if you think about it, I think they're gonna come along, and so traffic, instead of turning onto Old 34, if you've been through there, if you're not paying attention on one of the side gravel roads, you can almost be guilty of stopping in the wrong place. I'm almost surprised we haven't had somebody run through a good stop sign because of just not paying attention to how it all lays out. So, yeah, they're gonna have some barricades up to keep people from using the old highway, because they're gonna start tearing out, obviously, that bridge, and some of the old highway will be coming out. It's gonna be some significant changes. And I do believe, I don't know, there are multiple crossovers, and they're not gonna use all of them all at once, obviously, so, but I do believe we'll be driving on some of the new roadway, which as far as I understand, will involve Flint Bottom, but I have a superintendent who goes to those weekly meetings, and now that they've pushed it back, I can't tell you their exact plan, but I do know that that's why they're connected. Right now, their big push is to connect up the new lanes to the existing lanes, so that they can move all that traffic over to there and start tearing out that old highway and the bridge. So, and then a couple project updates for us, the last couple days, Friday and Monday, our guys were Jones, the contractor, been pouring concrete on Flint Bottom. That's gone well. They pulled all the way up to Beaverdale last night, not quite to, but as close as they could with their paver. So the next couple weeks, they'll be working on the handwork, the radiuses and stuff right there around the intersection. So, I mean, it's possible that segment could wrap up within about 3 weeks, give or take. And then, of course, once they're done with that, I would note that they're gonna jump to the east and work on the eastern segment of that, and that road will be closed. Local traffic will accommodate as far as people that actually live in the construction project. So same dynamic, and once we switch over, the locals will be able to drive through, or not even locals, everybody will be able to drive through the piece we're done with. So anyway, that project is moving along, and all things considered, honestly, I think it's gone very well, especially for how wet things were. Today, they're actually pouring the main line on the south end of the Highway 99 bridge. Daly's doing that, Daily Construction, so, actually that'll wrap up concrete on the south end of the bridge. North end, I think it's got another week or so before they can do any concrete work on the north end, but they were supposed to start putting rock in on the north end today, so there's still work going on, probably a week's worth of work anyway on the north end before they're ready for concrete as it is, so. Things are moving along out there. It's a different look, so sometime I'll try to get you out there, but it is nice to see that progress. I mentioned about a maintenance project out in White Camp, but I just simply want to give the guys credit. It was a slide. Tom and I slipped out there last Tuesday. We lost about a quarter of one of the lanes during, and that's a dead end, narrow gravel road, so that's a big deal. And basically the guys have been kind of more or less working in a creek to try to get the slope stabilized for the last week or two. I don't know how many, probably used close to 100 gabion baskets. Did a bunch of riprap work, and are in the tail end of the process of rebuilding the roadway. So a lot of credit to our guys. I thought that project would actually take longer. If you'd asked me, I would have said it at least a couple more weeks. So it's gone very well, and we'll be out of there and on to the next headache, wherever that's at.
Ryan, what road was that?
It's White Camp Road, just north of Burlington. And then dust control, county dust control, that it has been delayed. And the main reason is because there's a trucking shortage. And so I guess whoever pays the highest gets the trucks, and then other people are left to sit. So they're having a hard time getting the product from Chicago down to here, would be the main point of that. So they started Monday out in the Danville area. I believe they got 140th and Roosevelt done, and then it was just a matter as the trucks got going. So they have made progress since then, and they're out working. They're going to be here all week, but it's going to be slower than normal. Normally they hammer it out in a week or less, and it's probably gonna drag out a little bit longer because they just can't get the product as fast. So I thought I'd mention that to you, that is ongoing. So, other than that, guys are out blading, we have a little bit of moisture, so trying to put that to use.
That evening I called you, how big a tree was that?
Not very big.
Not very big.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I was either gonna have to hit the car or hit the tree.
You should have just stopped and moved it off.
I could have.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
Have your wife with you?
No.
That's not a great idea on Highway 99.
My wife would have been there, why, I'd have had her pull it off.
It was not a very big tree. I think the superintendent, I don't remember, no, actually, I ended up having a motor grader operator run up there and get rid of it. We actually were out because of the wind that came through here over the weekend. We didn't have as bad as elsewhere, but we did have, I think the guys were out 3 or 4 times just on down trees. So that been kind of a frequent occurrence here with some of these little bursts that we've had of storms. But yeah, so the call's fine. I mean, whether you call or whether dispatch calls, the call's gonna come through either way. So it was good. We got somebody out there and got it taken care of.
Well, I figured if I called you, and then when they called you, you say, hey, I'm already on this.
Yeah, which is what I do. When you call me, I just text the superintendent so that when they get a call from dispatch, they already know about it. And I just call the guy and send him out. So,
I gotta get with you later about some dust control. I had some questions about that, but
great. You wanna do that later then?
yeah.
Okay, that's exciting. Everybody likes to listen to that. So, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Rodney, police or maintenance?
Good morning. Got a lot of stuff going on. The alley project is finished up. They poured the last little northwest section last Friday, so the alley is open. We're kind of doing some crack sealing stuff along there, so that turned out really nice. You'll be able to park on that little northwest section probably here in another day or two, kind of letting it cure up a few more days before we get vehicles on there. Also last week in Judge Bailey's courtroom, they finished up the audio visual project. That was one of the deals that the state had contracted with the contractor for an audio visual setup in each one of the courtrooms in all 99 counties. So we'd already finished up the 3rd floor one, so they put it in Judge Bailey's. So now we have courtroom on 3rd and courtroom on 1st, all set up with that. So that finished up last Friday. The jail, they poured the slab for the generator last week. The generator's supposed to be in today. So I'm not sure if it's there yet this morning or not, but that's supposed to be here today. Also, we have a job opening, Phil mentioned last week, for lead maintenance. So if anybody's interested, they can stop by the auditor's office and grab a application, turn in, or they can go to the county website. It's also on Iowa Works, and also Team Staffing Solutions kind of working on that as well. So if you know anybody interested, have them stop by or visit the county website, and they can download the application and get it sent in. So other than that, we're keeping busy. Thank you.
I got stopped by somebody that works at the water department at Hy-Vee and said to say thank you and good job on that alley. He said that the water department loves it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been much needed for a long time, so
Thanks, Rodney.
thank you guys.
I'll take a copy of that job description down to the Buckeye.
Okay.
Put it up on the bulletin board.
I thought you were gonna apply for it, Bob.
I hope we have higher standards.
Never start an argument with anybody by saying by the barrel.
It was just out there.
Jam. Hanging curve. Jared Lasser, land use.
Good morning. We don't have anything on the regular agenda today for subdivisions, but we did have a couple of items we wanted to address through work session afterwards. So apart from that, I don't have anything noteworthy. I don't know if Zach has anything else.
No, just been busy. I've been out the last couple of days, catching up on some emails. I know Jared's been busy,
Yeah.
doing some planning stuff the last few days.
Nothing earth-shattering,
But
no.
nothing crazy, so typical stuff.
Moines County Recorder Natalie Stepner.
Good morning. We have been informed that Henry County Board of Supervisors has passed an ordinance for their off-road vehicles. And I believe their fee is double what Des Moines County is, so
Who is this, what county?
Henry County.
Henry County's double? That
So
doesn't make sense, they're not better than
So
us.
for-
What's the meaning of this?
people are not, used to not like our price, but I think they're gonna like it now, so,
Yeah, just point that out to them.
yep.
They could always move. It's gonna cost them.
But otherwise, things are going well in the recorder's office.
Thank you, Natalie. Ken Hyman, Community Services.
Good morning. Just a normal week this week, not a lot of meetings. Ryan's on vacation this week, so maybe that gave us a break for a week. So we're just doing the regular business, helping people with disabilities as they come in and getting applications and things like that. So just a normal week.
Thanks, Ken.
And on a lighter note, did you know Ken bought him a motorcycle so he could run around these places now? He's a Harley man.
Really?
This is my first Harley. I've had like, I don't know, 10 or 11 motorcycles before this, but they were all metric cruisers, they call them, but now I've got a Harley, yep. Thanks to my wife. We're having our 35th wedding anniversary in July, and that was our gift to each other. We both always wanted one, and we got a used one.
That's nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right.
I drive and she rides in the back. You should see the comfortable seat in the back. That's why she picked it out. It's really nice.
Just for the record, Ken, I'm looking at a moped this week. Hey, we'll go cruising sometime.
Yeah, let's go.
I was thinking a drag race.
Trent, I want to go out on a limb here and say you're probably here for the closed session.
I am, that's correct.
Is any reports from the county attorney's office? I saw her shooting up the stairs
Yeah.
and got to ask her how things were going, and she said they're going.
Yeah, the boss upstairs doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
You know, so we're real thin right now, but yeah, everything's going good.
Good. Angie Vaughn, safety.
Good morning. Really don't have anything to report. We had a really busy month with the active healer training, and I'm taking vacation the first part of July, so I want to make up for it. Other than that, really, things have been going well, so.
Good. Janelle Nally Longquist, Des Moines County Treasurer.
Good morning. We're keeping busy. We held our annual tax sale yesterday online, and out of 492 parcels that were offered, 433 were sold, so that was a total of $644,690 and some odd change, but we're just keeping busy, so we'll start processing those certificates today and getting those out and start in on collections again.
Thank you, Janelle.
You're welcome.
Chris Lee, Conservation.
Good morning, sorry I'm a little late, I had to do an interview on the radio this morning, got a perfect face for radio, I'm told, so. Just talking about our Big Hollow Water Quality Symposium coming up on Thursday, getting ready for that. Cross our fingers that the weather holds out. We've got, like, last I checked, we were around 50 RSVPs, so we're gonna have a really good turnout on that. We've gotten 325 or so responses to our online survey, which is an enormous response rate. So we're real thrilled about that. Otherwise, just kind of keeping the parks going. Campgrounds continue to be busy, and just kind of keeping on. So looking forward to bringing all this water quality stuff together and hearing what the engineers and the different agencies have to say from the research and stuff. They're going to be presenting that for the first time. I haven't even seen it yet, so looking forward to seeing what they've got to say on Thursday.
Big Hollow Campground keep filled up on the weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's generally, it seems like we're full usually Wednesday, definitely Thursday though. So if you're not there Tuesday or Wednesday, or early Thursday, there's a pretty slim chance you're gonna get a campsite for the weekend. And then we got 4th of July coming up, so I think, if I read the calendar right, we're falling right inside that 2-week window for 4th of July, so campground will probably fill up this weekend, and then we'll stay full clear through the 4th of July weekend. So, yes, sir.
Are fireworks allowed in state parks in Iowa?
No.
No.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Comments, or anybody online?
No, just us.
Della Schmidt, CEO of Real Greater Burlington. Their Greater Burlington Partnership And you're certainly welcome just to do or come anytime you want, but if there's anything you'd like to speak about, you are more than welcome.
There's a letter in the mail.
Don't
Is there a check in?
Okay, thank you. Speaking of which, I see no correspondence. Did either of you gentlemen get any correspondence?
Brian did.
I get correspondence all the time.
Somebody was discussing the ditch mowing schedule.
Yeah, we're mowing, that's what I can tell you. It takes a long time to cover that many miles of road. So particularly when you have a few breakdowns mixed in and a lot of wet weather and you only got so many bodies. So sometimes people get frustrated, that's all right, so.
Ryan? We'll proceed to discussion and vote. We have approval of department letters of appointment for fiscal '22. Every department each year sends in a complete list of their employees with the up-to-date salaries for each employee for the payroll department, and the board needs to approve those, and I know you've all seen them. You've both seen them.
Approve?
Second. Sarah?
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Shane Campbell.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes. I should stamp each one of those. I'll stamp those after the meeting. Okay. We have a fireworks permit for the Gleddy family reunion. Already sorted out and corrected by the auditor's office.
I move to approve Gleddy Family Reunion fireworks permit.
Second.
Sarah, I'm sorry.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes. And we have a fireworks permit for Scott and Laura Hobrig. Same story.
I move to approve fireworks permit for Scott and Laura Hodge.
Second.
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes. The auditor's office always checks these to make sure they've been approved by the fire chief in that area with the appropriate payment. We're lucky to have that efficient an auditor's office. We have a Class B permit for the Flint Hills Municipal Golf Course, and I spoke to the sheriff, and he said there's no problem.
Move to approve.
Second. Sarah?
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes. We have a cigarette permit, an annual cigarette permit for River Mart. I also spoke to the sheriff about this, and there's no problem.
Move to approve.
Second.
Here, Sarah?
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes. Hard to break habits, Sarah. I almost said Terry. And we have an employment contract for the maintenance director. We had a couple weeks ago, we had a closed session, and we offered Mr. Belisner the opportunity to become contract employment as the maintenance director. And he accepted. He is now the official maintenance director for Des Moines County at $70,000 a year.
I move to approve Hot Rod for maintenance director.
Second that.
Well, I'm not sure that's the motion I was hoping for, but I'm sure it'll be okay.
Sorry about that. I forgot where I was.
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell.
Yes, please.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Tom Brooker.
Yes.
I've been called worse, so I'll like that.
So my friend.
You know that's gonna stick though, right?
personnel actions for the auditor. Two, we have Sarah Doty, payroll first deputy, unpaid time off for June 14th, 7.5 hours unpaid. And Chandra Bleesner, clerk one, a 36-month step increase from $36,871.78 to $37,609.17.
Move to approve both of them.
Second. Sarah?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. Personnel actions for the recorder's office. We have Renee Wellborn, clerk two, unpaid time, 3 hours on June 8th, 7.5 hours on June 9th, and 7.5 hours on June 10th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. Three personnel actions for the sheriff. We have Keaton Hoshek, the deputy, a 6-month anniversary increase. The previous rate was $45,735.05. The new rate is $48,784.08. Monica Ryan, clerk two, a 1-year anniversary. Previous rate was $31,133.96. The new rate is $32,453.60. And Charles Thompson, part-time courthouse security new hire at $18.67 an hour.
Move to approve all three.
Second.
Sarah?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. And final personnel action for the correctional center is for Jacob Trumbull, an assistant cook, discharge, effective June 17th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have minutes for the regular meeting of June 15th, 2021. You're gonna have to motion that, Shane. Jim
Move to
wasn't
approve.
here. Second.
Abstain?
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Abstain.
Okay.
We have a closed session to discuss pending litigation for Iowa Code 21.5, paragraph 1, paragraph C. Is that how you say that, Trent? We will need a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go in closed session.
Second. Sarah?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. During the closed session, the board decided to solicit bids to replace the front courthouse stairs and heating system. So we need to have a motion to that effect.
I make a motion that we open bids up to replace the front steps and the heating systems on the courthouse front steps.
I second that motion.
Sarah?
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Shane McCampbell.
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. Okay. Other business.
I have none.
Future agenda items.
Have none?
Committee reports.
It was hot down in Branson, that's all I can tell you.
Not that.
And I had fun.
Good.
I had workforce development, and the bottom line is, just to make it really short, there's a lot of this money that's going around right now. It's a one-time deal, and we're living kind of in an illusion. And the only reason, or the only way that we're gonna survive over the next 3 years, no, I'm kind of being over drastic, but being dramatic, but everybody's gotta work. Everybody in Des Moines County needs a job, so I'm just sending this out there that if there's anybody in Des Moines County and you need a job, call me on my cell phone. I'll help you find a job. You don't have to fill out an application. Call me on my cell phone. I'll have somebody help you fill out a job. 319-457-2652. Leave a message, because I answer on the first ring. But look at this. If you need a job, there's jobs available. You need to work. You need to work.
And cut.
And cut. That was it, though. We need to-
We'll have that into a 60 by this afternoon.
We need jobs, or we got jobs. We need workers. So that's all. That's all I got.
Thank you, I agree. I attended, I guess, the ribbon cutting out at the Iowa Army Ammunition Plant. The road grader has been working on it for years. There's a big, huge section out there that they've, gonna be in a industrial park, and they had to get, of course, the Army or the Department of Defense owns it, so there's about 6 million pages of regulations and requirements to get anything done down there. Well, they've sorted all through that. I think they've got most of it fenced in now, and as soon as, they've got like 33 25,000 square foot buildings, all identical, and a bunch of land. So they've, and there's rail access, so it's, it would be very attractive to certain industries. So, but they had a ribbon cutting. They've, they're gonna, that it's, to the best of my knowledge, all the I's have been dotted and the T's crossed, and they're ready to start, trying to, get businesses in there. That's all I have. Public input. If anybody from the public would like to address the board, you may email the Board of Supervisors at board@dmcounty.com. That's BOARD@dmcounty.com, or call 319-753-8203, extension 4. That's 319-753-8203, extension 4. I'll give you a couple minutes to initiate that call or that email. In the meantime, anybody in attendance have any comments they'd like to make?
Your friend Tim Starbuck says hello.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He and I were talking about you early this morning out in the hospital.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he took care.
That's good.
He sedated me first though, so that don't get any ideas.
If you write something that we don't like, we'll just say it was under sedation.
All you guys out there have a good Father's Day.
Incidentally, the remedial courses I took for clicking on that link, did you see those?
I've went through them before, yeah.
Yeah, one of them with, the question, but the other was a game.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, yeah, you had to, every time you had a wrong answer, the wrong guy got closer to the server, the bad guy. And if you had a right answer, then you got closer to the server, and you had to spin a little dial
You know, that you got 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
is, remind me of
I've
Candy
done
Land.
that one before.
They update them every few months, I don't think I've actually done that.
Anyway, it was
Send
kind
him
of
another
fun.
one, he wants to play the game again.
Try me out.
I won easily.
Ms. Parker, why do you have closed sessions in the middle of the meeting?
We have, in the past, we had them after the meeting was over, and I believe it was it the county attorney or somebody told us that said you're supposed to have closed sessions during the meeting.
If you're gonna vote on
Right
something.
before you
Before
adjourn.
you gavel it, that's during the meeting.
Well, we've done that before. This one we had, because apparently we've got there was gonna be a vote after that. Whether we were gonna replace those stairs.
But still.
Closed
I
session.
will,
Bob, we're here
we've
to
always got it in mind.
we're here to patronize the taxpayers in Moines County, not the news.
Okay.
2 minutes up, if there's no further comments, with an aye, we're adjourned.
Aye.
Aye.
You just got reelected here.
Thanks a lot.
He's not gonna print it, but it was.
Hey, I did see you,
That's right.
see you on,
We can look at.
Subway roadway issue, and then regarding solar and wind after the subway roadway issue. So if you guys are ready to discuss that roadway issue.
Yeah. You guys are ready? I'll have a hard copy here.
Oh, I got one.
I'm trying to, I can do it out of here too. I think we first sent an email about this about 2 years ago. I don't think Shane was here, so this may be all brand new for him.
Anybody want an extra copy of this staff report, or?
These guys, I had it on my iPad.
So you guys should have got it on Friday, and then
What, on your iPad?
there you dropped off, there,
I printed some extras.
you got hard copies?
If you want to stick around, this is right up your bailiwick.
I'm staying.
Okay.
Yeah.
oh, I'm staying. Brian never leaves when we're here.
I somehow get in the middle.
You're saying for the solar wind too, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I have.
Yeah, that one's a little more, well, I guess they both pertain, so. You guys got what you need?
Interesting discussion.
You guys good? Okay, I'm just gonna kinda go through this, if you have a question, any point, kinda let me know, or Jared, if you wanna jump in at any point. I'm just gonna go through some of the history here. In 2018, we issued a zoning permit for Dan and Don Zeiser. They built a new residence at 9121 Glenmark Drive.
You're missing good stuff, huh?
No, this is okay. As we do with all our permits, we do a post inspection just to make sure that they built to what they said they were gonna build with the right setbacks and everything. So Jared had gone out in March of 2019 with the post inspection and
Oh, it's all solid state. Thank you for
It's
this.
an apple. Screen's cracked. Okay, As he did the inspection, he observed that the home's driveway was accessed by a narrow asphalt driveway that led to the south to 3 other homes. The private driveway in turn to the north provides access to Glenmark Drive and County Road. At this time, Jared and I were still fairly new at doing land use stuff. Jeff Hannon had passed away at the end of 2017, so we were kind of getting our feet wet. But in that first year, we had kind of learned about a provision in the subdivision ordinance that requires a driveway that serves more than 2 homes to be surfaced to the same standards as a private roadway, which is 22 feet with 66 feet right of way, if it's gravel at the minimum. So as we learned that new rule, and when we saw 4 homes along here, we were a little concerned about it. So Jared went back and did some research and found the land use files that we had from back when the subdivision was approved back in 2006. Went through a lot of meeting minutes and different things like that. So what we found as we went through the files, that the subdivision was approved in 2006, along with 9 other lots, this lot plus 9 other lots. And we noted that in that resolution, there was a condition that said Article 5, Section 2.7 of the subdivision ordinance be waived. However, any future development of the property for residential, commercial, or industrial purposes requires conformance to the roadway improvement standard. So that specific passage there is the one that refers to the requirement of driveway serving more than 2 homes. Needs to be at least the 22 feet wide, the minimum standard for a roadway. Just a note, that provision that states that was added to our ordinance in May of 2006, so just 7 months prior to this subdivision being approved, so it was a very new rule at that time.
Shane and I were in high school then.
I was only working here for about a year at that point. I don't think you guys were still in high school though, if I had to guess, right?
Your job isn't to question the board.
Continue.
Well, since I was in high school back then, I give me some context.
Yeah, you guys weren't there. So at the time of the subdivision approval, Mr. Roth, going again through meeting minutes, had indicated that there was no immediate plans for development, and that's why he made the request for the requirement of widening the roadway to be waived until a future date that the lots may be developed. And at the time of approval, there were 2 homes on that shared driveway, Mr. Roth and his neighbor, John and Deborah Weiberg. We did find also in some of the meeting minutes, zoning commission meeting from May 24, 2006. Land use administrator Jeff Hannon said, according to the subdivision, the abstracts for lots 4 and 8 would contain language requiring that requiring the road to be improved if the lots are ever developed. I guess I can touch on that here in a minute, I think, as I get through some of this. As far as development that's happened since that subdivision approved, the first new home was built by Blake and Richard Cameron at 9379 Glenmark Drive. This lot actually fronts directly onto Glenmark Drive. And from what we could find was a zoning violation. We can't actually find that there was ever a permit filed for that one. So that probably should have triggered something to happen with the roadway, even though it wasn't directly on what this driveway was. But we wouldn't have known because we didn't have a permit for it. Nobody submitted a permit. The second home built in the subdivision, and the first one that directly fronts onto this, the existing 10-foot driveway, was Jason and Deanna Johansson at 9117 Glenmark Drive. It was built in 2016. At the time, Mr. Hannon had issued a permit, and the first one didn't trigger it. This one definitely should have. It was, again, going back to what it said, any future development of residential, commercial, industrial should require conformance. So it wasn't taken care of at that time. And then the third home built there was the one that we issued the permit by the Zeisers, which was in early 2018, and that's kind of when we learned about a lot of the history that happened there with the property. As I mentioned, yeah, the one with the Johansson should have triggered it, definitely. I think part of it maybe since 10 years had passed since the house was built, everyone just kind of forgot about the provision, and that once that house was built, that the roadway should have should have been upgraded. Let's see, in March of 2019, we had an initial phone call with Mr. Roth just to discuss the issue with him. Were you familiar with this? Do you remember this being part of the subdivision approval? He had to do this roadway. He claimed he didn't have recollection of anything,
Jack,
didn't know he had to do that.
Was Mr. Roth part of the zoning commission?
He was, up until, go ahead.
He actually was appointed in 2009, I believe, so it was 3 years after the subdivision was approved.
But yeah, and then he resigned
Late
2019.
2019.
Yeah,
Okay.
possibly because we had called him and he wasn't happy with us about this, but that's just speculation, we don't know.
I just threw that out there because I was.
But yes, he was. So he claimed he didn't have any recollection, and so just not exactly sure what to do or how to enforce it. We met with Todd Shelf, and the assistant county attorney at the time, just outlining what we should do, what's the process. His suggestion was to start with sending a formal letter to Mr. Roth outlining the requirements and what was in the approved subdivision, and give him a timeline to make the improvements. So that was sent in January of 2020, and with the deadline of getting the improvements done by January 31st, 2021. We've checked on a few different occasions, no improvements have been made. We did, again, at the direction of Mr. Shelf, send a follow-up letter in November.
No communication? No phone call?
No phone call, nothing. Nope.
There was an email,
What's that?
there was an email we got back at one point.
I think that was when we first had called them back in 2019.
He had initially had some email communication with the zoning commission chair, Dick Keith,
Yeah.
asking about some
That was
specifics
back,
with the roadway.
yeah, that was back when we first had called him, but not after we sent the letter. The letter itself, we did send copies to all the adjacent property owners as well, so it went to Mr. Roth, it went to the Weibergs, the Johansons, and the Zeisers. The Zeisers have communicated with us on multiple occasions, haven't heard from them in quite a while, but they were just concerned about the issue. They didn't know that they would possibly be required to update some. Mr. Roth, this goes through the Zeisers to us, basically said, hey, this was a requirement, you guys were supposed to do this, as you build the houses, you're supposed to fix the roadway, upgrade the roadway. So they spent some time researching on their own, they got their own attorney. I just mentioned the thing about Mr. Roth saying that there would be something in the abstracts. They went to an attorney, looked through their abstract, there's nothing in their abstract that says they're supposed to do this. So we've had communication with them, like I said, it's been a while since we heard from them, but we've kind of informed them that they don't have any specific obligation on any one specific property owner to accomplish the roadway requirement. Basically, our thing is, the subdivider said he was supposed to do this, it's his responsibility. However, he figures that out with the other landowners, we don't really care, but we're putting the onus on the person who did the subdivision and making that requirement there. We've also noted that the roadway surface does not have to match the existing asphalt. It could be gravel, it could be a combination of asphalt and gravel. We've kind of discussed some different options there. But it needs to be to the 22-foot width standard, just to ensure for crossing traffic, for emergency vehicles, things like that. There's some things in here Mr. Zeiser did at his own time, put some gravel along there just to widen it out. It looks like it's been removed at this time, but that's really the history of what's happened to date. What we found out about from the history back in 2006, what the requirement says he was supposed to do, sending the letters, and where we're at today. I've got a couple different options we can go over, but I don't know, Jared, did you want to mention anything else, or Trent, before we kind of discuss those things?
Well, I know we went through the litigation options in closed sessions. I know I've talked to the two of you about many of the pitfalls we have with this particular case. And I believe the supervisors came to the opinion, based on my recommendation, that we don't pursue litigation at this time. And for several reasons, I guess. We don't need to go deeper into that. So I think we're looking at the way forward. Currently, we've got ordinance number 24, we're reworking ordinance, or no, I'm sorry, ordinance number 29, we're reworking ordinance number 34. So that being the subdivision ordinance and the 2-mile zoning ordinance, which encompasses all of these. So I think kind of recommendations going forward for future, so for future would be one, the language we have in there right now just says no subdivisions unless everything's done all up front, which is great and that's nice, but that tends to get waived. I've pulled language from, and I have language from the city of Des Moines, but in researching, I don't want to take entirely what they do, because they only have 100% bond, but they have a 10-year language, which I like. But what several different, either communities and or counties have done with these subdivisions is they've required a performance bond, giving them, and I think we'll say 10 years or less, to give them time to perform all of these proposed improvements to the subdivision. And I think 120%, I saw one community had 120%, which accounts for, if you're talking 10 years down the road, right? To put in a road, it's gonna cost 20% more, at least?
At least.
At least, yeah. So, I think going forward, you know, having that requirement for performance bonds moves us a long ways down the road of correcting, stopping it from happening in the future, and giving us teeth, and then also having teeth in laying out a specific path for litigation within our ordinance, and a time frame and all of that, so that way, because now, and I said in the meeting 20 years later, now we're 15 years later, so I apologize for that misstatement, but 15 years later, it's just a hot mess, right? Who's responsible for what? So we can clarify that. And the other idea I had, and Brian might laugh at me, I don't know, but I know.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I know where you're going.
You know, is to have a revolving fund for people to come in and fix the roads, you know, fix these, pay back, and that's a way to maybe get these that are single lane, because this is single lane chip seal. It's a nice lane, except if there's a fire and Burlington Fire Department tries to get one of their engines in there, they're not turning around, they're backing out. I mean, they're driving in and backing out, and if they have to get a tanker in to bring them water, they're backing in and then driving straight out. But it's, you know, so for the law enforcement, for the ambulance, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. But if there's a fire out there, they're not gonna, those big rigs aren't gonna be able to get in there.
Well, that's almost the sole reason for the road conversation and all these things is that a lot of it has to do with the fire, and emergency response ability to not only get in, but get out, like you're saying. One thing I wanna mention as far as that, cause I wasn't quite on where you were going, but I was close. You can't spend secondary road funds on anything off of county right away. So if you choose to go that route, cause I'm less opposed to what you mentioned, if you choose to go some sort of a route, which I don't know exactly how that'd work, it would actually have to run through the board of supervisors. I mean, I would probably have to be somehow involved in it because typically road stuff tends to land in my lap, but point being is there's nothing that can run through fixing subdivision roads. I believe at one time, off of White Camp Road, ironically, there was a subdivision road that was not done properly. There's a history there, it was a gigantic mess, and what happened was the board took it on, did it through assessment, and all those people paid the county back over 10 years, which means the county lost money, just for the record. But beyond that, off of the right of way, by code, you can't spend secondary road funds.
And that's why that statement's always put on private road subdivisions, it's not the responsibility of the county.
And we don't take over, for Shane's purpose, Des Moines County does not take over private roadways, subdivision roads. We have never, and we likely won't start.
We're not like the city on that aspect.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what standard you build them to. It doesn't matter what you wanna do. If you wanna build to a better standard because you wanna sell the lots better, that's great. We don't take them over. We have a road network we can't afford as it is. So that's where our stance is. So I just wanna mention that because it's not as simple as just, oh yeah, we'll just keep a fund at the secondary roads office and whatever. It's not that simple and clean. It never is when you get into these. And I also just wanna mention, because I was around for all of this, this is simply a situation of a guy waiting it out, hoping it would never have to happen. And perhaps he succeeded, but this is not a guy that forgot about this or whatever else. This was all, there was only, you know, all these lots are created, but there's only this, so can I wait and do it once I get some lots? It's not like it was just all forgotten. Now,
I mean, it's like, why would you
Yeah,
split off 7 lots if you don't have intention to build a house on it?
we don't have a great, we're not really set up program-wise to follow stuff up, or say we're county, regional planning, however you wanna look at it, to babysit people that wanna pull this game, but that's the situation.
And on the, my brain's not working, but you guys went back and checked his paperwork to, or checked the paperwork to see if it was written in if the language was written in there,
Abstracts.
there you go.
So,
We
So what do you-
personally haven't reviewed it, but we just heard through the one property owner, the Zeisers, they said that they talked to their attorney and looked through their abstract.
So what happened when you looked at the platting, right? So when you look at the plat, there's notes on the plat. So yes, here you can see them.
No, you can't really read them because it's so small,
But
but
it's
down
just
the
so,
corner, there's always
you
notes
can't
in
read
there.
it. But on a plat, you can read it, and part of those are, and that would be put in, a smaller version like that would be made small enough to go in an 8x, 13, what is that, paper, regular paper.
Usually on 11 by 17, or
Well,
larger.
And then they cut them into thirds, right, for the abstracts. So, but if it was in the notes on the plat, but the notes on the plat were just the standard, you will follow all ordinances by the county, so they didn't have the notice put on the plat after this agreement was made, put into the notes on the platting. So when the plat was filed, it didn't have that
Exemption.
special language that was, that the board approved, so that the subsequent buyers, even having title opinion done, they have no way to have notice because it's not specifically on their chain of title.
Now, Jared, maybe you can answer this for me, because you always do resolutions with all the plats.
Yes.
Was that stipulated in the resolution? Because the resolution should be recorded with the plats.
Yes.
The language is in the resolution.
It is in the resolution. That statement that I
That's
read
the whole
off,
reason
that
we're
is-
here.
That is in that is in the resolution.
Yeah.
That was recorded with the plats,
Yes.
so it's looking at all the documents that were recorded. with
It's
the
the
plats.
developer's responsibility.
Yep.
Whether he tries to pass it on as part of his sale agreement with the lot purchasers is a side deal that perhaps is successful and perhaps is not. But the developer of a subdivision, it's their responsibility.
Yeah.
It's-
We have held the road width elsewhere where it was challenged, or we have at least come up with something that worked with fire departments that met this location differently. But you have held road widths elsewhere. There's a big subdivision up on 150th that has been expanded since within the gentleman's passed away now that did it, but this is a topic that comes up with almost every multi-lot subdivision as far as road width and turnaround for fire and everything else.
You would think for their personal safety that they would want this road fixed.
They don't wanna go to the expense.
Yeah, that's the problem, is they didn't know anything about it, but I'm aware, the Zeisers have contacted me in the middle of this whole thing too, in the distant past. I've had multiple conversations with them, because they were frustrated. Also because when they bought their lot, they wanted a driveway out onto Glenmark Road. And I refused it because it's written right in the subdivision documents that all access for all lots created will use this road. because it is the subdivision road. So I denied access, and I do that all the time. When I write something up in a subdivision, I tend to stick to it, or at least pretty closely. So,
I kind of, the idea of the bond, going forward, the bond might be an interesting,
well, at least a conversation to have, for
yeah,
sure.
that sounds like, I
Go
can
ahead,
see
Derek.
we're trying to go back on this particular
Well,
individual when other people own that land now.
Well,
go ahead, Derek.
We do have existing language referencing a bond in there, I just don't think there's any specifics in terms of a time frame, like Trent had mentioned, but I just wanted to note how I think the key flaw here was that typically when we're talking about a brand new subdivision with a brand new road, the process involves doing a preliminary plat, looking at the design of it, going to the final plat, but before the final plat is approved, the road infrastructure gets installed and can be inspected prior to the approval of the final plat, so that it's all done as a condition of having that plat approved, so the lots can be sold. So I think it's a clear example here where the idea of waiving that on the condition that, oh, I don't have plans to develop it right away, but maybe in the future, that's the problem, is that once the plat is recorded and we move on, people can say whatever in the future, and it becomes difficult to enforce that. So I think if we strengthen the language in terms of making it so that even in a situation like this, where it's an existing road, it's existing driveway, but have that be so that you're, as a condition of being able to do this subdivision, you need to have that infrastructure done at the time of the subdivision for.
We've got that set up the same way for septic, right? I mean, similar, but they've got to have the septic set up before they can,
Well, septic is state law,
Okay.
so that's all
okay.
state law, state regulation. So, and that's where we come down is, we can strengthen the language all we want, but the supervisors can waive it like they did right here. I mean, you know, the old saying, the laws were written into law by men, it could be written out of law by men just as easily. And so what this does, is this gives the supervisors a tool that's right there, already in the ordinance, already thought of, to say, look, if we want to do this, then we want to have this bond at 120% or whatever we think. And it could be 100, we want to go up 5 years or whatever, but we'll give you X amount of time. Because what that does, as a practical matter, depending on the size and scope of the subdivision, they might have street, street 1, and plan on using that first, and then lane A second, then street 2, and then lane B, or however it shapes out. And so they might say, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna sell these lots, we're gonna build these roads, and then go further back. I don't know, I'm not a subdivider, but it allows ways to incrementally do that, yet still, we have teeth, we have the whole time, we have that bond. So as soon as they're in breach, we can say, hey, bond holding company, and, cut us a check, and it's there.
That would probably make it easier for board of supervisors, future board of supervisors, saying, well, you only have to put your roadway into this lot, and you have a bond there further.
The most
I don't know.
commonly sorry, Tom.
No,
The most commonly waived thing that I've seen on subdivision roads is grade. I'm gonna mention that, is the steepness. That's.
Cul-de-sac length has been one too.
Okay, so, they're, Trent's right. I mean, I've watched boards come and go, and different boards have different opinions, and things do get waived. So having something there for just in case is a great idea. I agree with that. Because the fact is that you guys will waive something 2 weeks from now in a subdivision. I don't mean that bad. It's just, a guy comes in.
It's not always bad. Sometimes
Yeah, I'm just saying, it has happened, and it's a little bit like one size fits all doesn't go very well. I mean, I guess if you live in a town and you want all your subdivisions look identical and you're that rigid and count, then it fits. But in the county, I can think of a number of places where I've been called to talk about, well, this is a lot steeper than we allow, you know, that kind of a thing, so.
One thing about the alternatives for some of these longer cul-de-sacs in the rural areas, one thing we've had in a number of recent subdivisions that has been discussed is the alternatives for either a cul-de-sac bulb at the end or a cul-de-sac with a length of greater than 1,000 feet. We work with the fire department with recommendations for things like having a hammerhead turnaround or a pull-off that would allow a vehicle to pass at a certain point. And so part of the ordinance update is we've included some language in there about some of these alternatives so that it's actually in the ordinance as opposed to, oh, we're just gonna keep waiving these things repeatedly and coming up with these alternatives that aren't expressly codified. So I think part of that is to actually build some flexibility into the ordinance in the sense that it clearly defines instances where these alternatives would be justified based on the limitations of the topography or the terrain in the area. So I think that's part of it, is just making sure that it's not just so-and-so doesn't want to comply with this, we'll put this other substitute in place that we've heard is good. It's actually going to be something that we can cite back to the ordinance with, that this is a commonly encountered situation where certain circumstances it would be justified.
You'll get a pretty long set of regulations if you're gonna try to.
I mean,
we can't do
control for
everything,
everything, but at least we give a little bit of.
Some of those ones that we
context.
waive a lot, we try to fit in a few new things. But I guess what we were, just to kind of back up a little bit, what we were looking for today is just some guidance here from you guys, kind of, it sounds like maybe you talked about a little bit in closed session a little bit, or.
I think, you know, the talking attorney, we're not talking about, we're not interested in pursuing litigation, at least not at this time. I don't know, I do like something to try to keep this or limit this going forward, and I think the bond issue maybe shows some promise, but it permits a little flexibility for the developer. Does that make sense?
I like the idea. I'm kind of curious on some details as to where, you know, you talk about 120%. Where are those numbers coming from?
All that would have to
and
be
stuff like
worked
that.
out. I just thought it was kind of an interesting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm curious about some more detail.
Like I said, there's already some language in there in the ordinance to address that, but I don't think, it doesn't sound like it's ever been used, and maybe it needs to be beefed up in terms of some specifics, so that's probably something that's a relatively easy fix, since we already have the framework for it in there.
So, I don't think we're interested in having you sit Todd on them right now.
No, that's fine. But that's what we wanted. It's kind of been out there. The timeline was up. We just needed to get some direction here. So what you guys want to do, I think that was one of our options, just kind of, all right, let's forget about this one, chalk it up to a learning experience. We're going through the update. Let's just make sure we address it in there with some tougher language. Maybe include some tighter things. We'll work with Trent on the bond.
I would like to see that, sharpen up those teeth, you know, so
Yeah,
we can.
just so this doesn't happen again, so that
Right.
Like Brian was saying, so somebody, I think he's probably right, that somebody was just trying to wait it out, so he didn't have to do it.
He
And,
succeeded.
and he probably succeeded, but
He did.
let's tighten it up so it doesn't happen in the future, so, and those ordinances hopefully will be coming
Okay.
sooner than later.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll head into solar and wind ordinances.
Not enough.
Everybody ready to start
There's
the
a lot of Chinese.
next work session? We have a work session, Board of Supervisors, the Southeast Iowa Regional Planning regarding the solar and wind ordinance.
Yeah, all right, we talked about this previously, back in October of 2020 initially, and then, we kind of talked about it informally at a separate work session in January. We were actually talking about zoning commission membership at the time, but somehow got on the topic of wind and solar. We initially brought this to your attention, again, as we're going through the, subdivision and zoning ordinance updates. This is something that we wanted to try to address because we've had several inquiries about solar and wind farms, mostly solar. Jared and I think have heard of potentially 4 different solar farm developments in the county. Actually, a week and a half ago, I had somebody in my office said that their company said they're actively pursuing a fairly large solar farm in the county out by Yarmouth, which I think is what Brian had mentioned before.
What's a fairly large farm?
1,000 acres.
And the one in Wapello is about 800 acres.
And for the record, from what I understand, I talked to the Louisa County engineer, I haven't talked to an assessor or anything like that. From what I understand, the tax base on that land goes to 0. And then there's some sort of a backfill that comes back through the state through some sort of a green energy type scenario. And I don't know any of that gospel, I just asked the question and he did a little check-in and said this is what I understand. So, but just to give you a little bit of how that works with that, I was curious, obviously.
So the tax rate, does the solar company lease that land from farmers? Does it buy it? Do the farmers own that, or how's that work?
The one up that's actually in the vicinity where I live, from what I understand, they lease. They sign a short-term lease that gives them the right to do environmental studies. And then with the right to roll that into a long-term, much higher paying lease, which from what I understand, the one that's up in my neck of the woods starts at 35 years with the right to extend it to 50 years. So.
And nobody's collecting any taxes or kickback for that?
I don't know, again, I don't know how, I haven't researched the true, I guess, the facts. So I hate to sit here and say it, but like I said, I've been talking, when I heard about this, I did call up and talk to the Louisa County engineer. And he was actually not 100% sure. And so he, I think, reached out to somebody there in Louisa County, I'm not sure who, and from the sounds of it, from what he understood, the taxes on the land must be waived through I don't know, through the
Nobody's
area in
making
the
that
sky
many
with the
taxes
green
without getting some
lawn.
money from somebody.
I don't know, yeah, and so that's how I understand it, is that the tax goes away, on the ground, the assessment, whatever you wanna call it, and then there's some sort of a backfill back to the departments to get the money. I've not had the time or taken the time to chase the actual details on that.
You guys
I'm
got
not
anything on
familiar
that?
with, I'm not familiar with that, I don't know.
I don't know that really matters, I'm all for people doing, I don't like the concept, but I'm all for people using their land, I guess, how they wish. I think there's, anyway, I wasn't signing up for it, but they didn't come talk to me, so.
You haven't got the lease agreement yet.
Well, they talked to my neighbors, and I will tell you, I
Wait till you see
understand.
what that lease says.
I understand why they're signing up for it, because I know what they're paying.
What are they paying?
And it's more than you can make farming or renting your ground out.
Check your
Through the rumor mill, I've heard that Wapalos was up in the $700 to $800 an acre range, and the rumor mill here is that they're upwards of $900 an acre. And I believe that's probably annual.
Wow.
And if the tax rate does in fact go away, and you start thinking about that math, and you know anything about farming, I can't fault some people for looking at that mathematically, economically. So, again, those are all kind of hearsay or whatever. I talked to somebody that was a landowner, but I can't. It was a private conversation. She asked me not to pass on to who it was, so.
I'm ready to go to the pros and cons page. What are we doing?
Well, I did some math too.
Yeah.
The last time Bob Bartles was here, I was talking about recycling those things. And it's a deal, it's cheap to put them in landfills. They've got cadmium in them, I don't know, all sorts of rare earth minerals that leach into the groundwater. And they do not want them, in landfills. And that's where they think they're going, because they basically really started putting these in the early 2000s, so in the next few years. So anyway, and I read that they cost more to recycle than to manufacture. So the best I could come up with was it costs $20 to $30 per panel to recycle those. To disassemble them, take that stuff out of them, rather than dumping them in there. So an average panel is about 6 foot by 3 foot. 18, let's say 20 square foot. How many square foot in an acre? 43,000, something like that?
560, 43, 560.
Okay, so then you got a 2150, 2200 panels per acre. You figure 2,000 panels per acre times $30 is $60,000 an acre to recycle those. If you got 800 acres, that's 48 million. No, I don't know.
That's my buddy.
Anyway, so where I found this is on some solar website, and they say, you know, it's a problem, you know, and he said research needs to focus on recovering solar grade silicone to improve the economics of panel recycling, and all that's well and good, and I hope they do that. But we're talking $1 or $1.50 per panel to recycle those. What happens in 25 years or 30 years when, and I don't know who they belong to when that lease goes on. If the company's supposed to take them out, what if they're out of business?
I asked that question.
What'd they say?
They're in ditches.
The landowner I spoke with, as I posed a number of questions, not just from county related, it was a conversation with somebody I'm friendly with, was that the answer was pretty weak to me as far as what they were told, but from what I understand was, because I said, what happens when they go defunct, when they go belly up? Because I mean, that's utility companies blow off into the wind constantly, and that's what this is a utility company, to some extent. And the comment was, oh, we put all that money aside right up front, so no matter what someday, your land will be returned to exactly the same condition it is, and there'll be no cost to you, and however, whether we're here or somebody else, that money's already setting for that. That was, in summary, that was the answer.
That's kind of like the checks in the mail.
And I don't know how you back that up if you have a contract with a company that, then the company goes belly, because you know these things get bought out and things
You would have to
change.
have a bond, that's the only way I could think of, some sort of bond that says it's there for X number, and it would have to, and I don't know, there might be a breakthrough in recycling 10 years from now, and maybe they can recycle them for $2 a piece, who knows?
Well, windmills have been up for a while and they can't figure out what to do with the blades.
Well, and part of mine is when we talked to Mr. Bartles, you know, he's got on a lot of his buildings, he's got solar panels, and I said, did they talk to you about recycling them? And I went through some of that, he says, they never mentioned it. Well, I've been online, you can look at your house, you know, it can say how many panels you need or something like that, you know, and then it'll say, well, your house worth more money, this is how much you're gonna save after you put in so much money after 12 years. I have never seen one of those little calculators that addresses anything about getting rid of those. And I, for one, do not want them in Brian's ditches. I'll be long gone in 30 years, thank God. Anyway, but I don't want them in Brian's or his successor's ditches. I don't want them in our landfills. And what farmer can afford $60,000 an acre?
Well, that's
to clear his
just
stuff off, or like you said, the company can be out of business. Who knows? And if I don't know. The only thing that would make me comfortable if there was a bond out there, they had a bonding company said, okay, we've got the money at the end of this period, or anytime in between those panels become unusable, however you write that up, we will recycle those and return that land to its original condition. And that's, nobody talks about that, and so I wondered, but when I found out what it cost, the only other one I saw said it averaged $25 or $24.
I didn't ask about the bond. I actually know somebody else that I believe signed up, about 40 acres. I can ask that question. I don't know if there was a bond included or not, and I guess where I want to go back to the beginning of this, when I brought this up, I mean, there is a line in here somewhere between personal property and concern for county. I brought it up from the angle of I mean, that tax base is dangling in the back of my head, obviously, because that's how funds are generated for us. But I brought it up as far as road usage and potential damage, especially when you start thinking wind farms are one whole different animal because of the equipment they have. But anything you do here generates a large amount of traffic. You got to talk about people parking on the road versus, you know, I know in Wapello they created a huge construction staging area where everybody parked on a gravel parking lot on private property. I mean, the number of vehicles up there was crazy when they were at peak of whatever they were doing. And so that's why I started this conversation is I don't know if there is a way without countywide zoning, and I'm not necessarily a proponent of countywide zoning by any stretch, but whether there's any way to protect the county resources or tax base or whatever, like some of this, I don't know where that line is. Some of it gets into questions that a personal property owner should be asking in their own, you know, to protect themselves. I don't know.
And the documents you gave us in the paper, what you wrote, you know, said that, you know, that if it wasn't countywide zoning, it would be a specific ordinance aimed
Yeah, I was thinking about jumping in here at some point, because some of the things we're talking about maybe aren't
Go ahead, I already.
specifically about what we need to be, but I was letting you guys talk about it. But, so part of the reason this came about is we're going through the ordinance updates. You know, we only have zoning in the 2-mile boundary, so we were looking at including something specifically in the zoning ordinance to try and address wind and solar. Probably a little more so on like the smaller scale, you know, individual solar panels or wind. You don't see too many of the wind, but we've had a couple of the solar ones. The current ordinances didn't really have a good way to address it, but we could address it in that 2-mile boundary. But the issue becomes some of these larger scale solar farms that are not within the 2-mile boundary. If you get a large wind farm, probably not going to be in a 2-mile boundary. So how do we address those? And is it a county-wide thing? And then the options there are, do you do something as a county-wide zoning, or do you do a standalone wind and or solar ordinance? And part of the reason we're asking the question is we're, again, hopefully coming up on approving these ordinances in the near future. We either include something in the 2-mile boundary. If we decide to do something on a county-wide scale, we won't include it in the 2-mile, and it would just be something, a standalone county-wide ordinance, so.
I think we can address it with ordinance, and then it counts within the zoning, 2-mile zoning area, and it counts in the county as a whole. So we can use ordinance. If we do individual ordinance, these are two separate things. If we put it into zoning, now we're having to put it into kind of this hazmat, because it is truly a power plant thing. So if you put on a zoning hat, you're really talking industrial zone, because it's a power plant. You know, you might not think of a little, well, not my watch, but most watches have a little thing that's solar, right? You might not think of that as a power plant, but that's what it is. I mean, at its core, it's producing power, at least enough for your little watch, right? So when we're saying we're gonna produce enough power that now we're going to sell it wholesale, right? That's what that would be for zoning. But regardless, I think when we talk about the concerns and the similarities, you know, it's like trying to compare a coal plant to a nuclear power plant. They're just totally different animals. And I think the same thing for solar versus wind. They may both be renewable, but I think that's about where the differences end when we're talking language as far as, you know, preservation of resources, what do we do long-term? What's the true lifespan of that resource? How are we going to recapture the land so it's usable again afterwards? They're similar questions, but the answers are gonna be a lot different. And that's why I think we need to have separate ordinances. Just because what we do for solar panels, like you're saying, they have all these different rare earth items, different things. Where windmill, they're just, it's different materials, different things.
And I think it's different if Brian wanted to put solar panels on his house or his tool shed or something like that and needed like a couple dozen, you know what I mean, or something like that. He was gonna save a few $1,000s over the lifetime of those, and at the end of the time, he was gonna get stuck with $750, you know what I mean, but that's one thing, and but when you start putting in those industrial size stuff like that, like somebody that had 1,000 acres, if it would cost you $30 a panel to do that, and I suspect 2,000 panels, that's 40,000 square feet. I suspect they crowd them in as close as they can together. I don't know. So that's $60 million in 25 or 30 years. I don't know. The county can't, and I don't know any farmers around that could absorb that. But somebody's going to absorb it. And so, but it wouldn't be, like I said, if somebody, and I suppose they're probably already, one of the comments I read was that there were already, but I don't know where state or federal, certain things that couldn't be put in a landfill, and that solar panels are supposed to fit into that. But I called, they don't accept them here, so then I called the Scott County. I can't find out up there. I talked to them once and asked them, they said, where are you sending them from? So I said, Elbridge, because I said Des Moines County anyway, so I said, oh, okay, well, call us back. Well, then I called back, and anyway, they said, well, why do you want to know? Well,
Trying to get rid of
it. So they want my phone number. So I gave them my phone, said, this is Tom. So they haven't called me back, so I assume they think that maybe that I'm landfilling them someplace. I have no idea what they're doing. But I don't think there's a whole lot of places that do this. Maybe it'll get better if there are more in the future. Maybe not. But it's our job, and say people in this room, is to protect Des Moines County, you know, the citizens and the financial ability of Des Moines County to provide the services you all provide. And if somebody drops a $60 million bill on us, that would interfere with that.
I think it's part of the reason we bring this up.
Yep, nope, all right. So anyway, so I don't know whether you would have different ones for what you would call
I
it,
think
Trent
it
would
would-
call it industrial and then, or residential.
I think it'd probably be separate ordinance. I was gonna mention this too, is, I mean, we have some documentation of counties that don't have zoning, that do have, I don't think we have any examples of a countywide solar ordinance, but countywide wind ordinances. So outside of a zoning ordinance, they are somehow regulating wind energy systems in some manner. And I think from our previous conversations, and I think Brian already touched on it, and you're touching on the decommissioning side, I mean, I think our concerns are what happens to the roadway when they install it? If they do remove them someday, what happens to the roadway system then too? And then what happens in general with them at the end of the life? Those are kind of the main questions. I think that's probably, if we were to do something, the primary things we try to address, but it may get into some other things then too about, which are more, this is where it kind of gets tricky, is like is there a setback requirement from the road or from another house? And that's where it kind of gets more into the zoning side and might get a little more tricky.
Maybe it's possible to do some kind of basic things about general public safety in terms of distance from existing homes, for example, but when you start getting into the realm of setbacks on an individual property, design, aesthetics, the height, where, if it can be built in a certain area of the county but not another area, then you're getting into what could easily be interpreted as zoning. And if we have a zoning ordinance that only applies to the 2 mile area, and all of a sudden we're seeing trying to regulate areas outside of that, then that would be a problem, that could be called out as.
Could be a
yeah,
problem,
yeah.
So that's part of the reason why we'd ask Trent here is, where do you run into some of those legal issues potentially on a zoning side? As far as we know, nobody's been challenged that does have these standalone wind ordinances, but if you were to be challenged, where do you run into an issue or not? But
Are there any windmills in Wayne County? I don't think there are.
No,
They're just
there's-
up there, Delzell's held some up there at Newport Junction or a couple of
Those
them.
Well,
are
there's no
private.
farms, there's a couple individuals, and actually, a number of them have failed, and they're no longer in service.
And London's got one up
We
there.
only have one, but there was a company that came around, oh, Jesus, my dad's still alive, so it had to be 12 to 15 years ago or something like that, that was proposing, and actually from what I understand, buying the easement, at least the early easement, for a windmill site up in the northwest corner. The big thing about windmills is you need different terrain. I mean, we have flat terrain up in that area, you're not gonna come down and put them in hills around. They need a wind profile that you don't get once you get into hilly ground. And so, for the exact situation there, they did come and speak to my family at that time, but from what I understood at that time is we were right on the edge of their kind of south and east border of what they could justify for wind profile. The wind industry, from the roadside of it, is a little bit easier to regulate. They also cause a ton more damage than I'm guessing anything with solar would ever cost. But wind energy requires just massive, massive equipment. They literally can't make it on an average gravel road. They can't make it to the site without doing reconstruction, taking the crown out. The cranes alone, or talking to other engineers, are just massive. And so
They build cranes specifically for that application.
yeah, so the point being is for them to be able to work in your county, they about have to play ball with you in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I've heard of counties getting pavements replaced because of them destroying the pavements of gravel roads. They would move dozers in, flatten the road to be able to move it, and widen the road and move and regrade, fill up the ditches with rock where they couldn't make it around the corner, but then they had to come back in and reconstruct or pay somebody, however it was, I don't. So point being is that's actually, there's kind of a dynamic there with wind that there is not with solar. My guess is solar is they roll in a legally loaded semi with solar panels, and the materials, I mean, all those products that come in are not probably going to be overweight, and you're not gonna have a lot of moving permits or stuff like that you have teeth with and can actually stop from using the roads if you really wish to. So solar's actually, I don't know, it's almost got a bigger long-term impact, maybe negative, I guess, from everything we discussed. I don't know, but actually, as far as getting put in, it's a little sneakier because I think they probably just run everything illegal.
Isn't that work a lot of it by hand? I'm assuming those panels, like 6 foot by 3 foot, I'm assuming they have people that put those in. I've never watched them put it in, and they just kind of, what are they, see them, what are they, 3 or 4 inches thick, or?
I bet they're thicker
Probably,
than that. I take the,
I don't know.
I feel like the wide thermal panes, they're really not all that thick.
I mean, we could drive up to Wapello sometime. There's a whole field
Doesn't
full
matter,
of them.
but I don't think they need the equipment and stuff.
But they
Like,
drill,
need a
you know,
parking lot
every
for
one
all
of them
the
has a
people.
footing underneath them, you know, there's posts that go down to a footing of some type. I
It
mean,
would
they're
have to
not,
be
they're gonna build them
removed
to
if they were
take,
gonna restore the land to its original.
you know, 100-mile-per-hour wind, so they're gonna put them in structurally sufficient, so. Anyway, that's the difference for the roadside from wind to solar, is there's probably less abuse from the solar side of it for the roads, just more wanting to make sure that it doesn't turn into a cluster. There's a ton more abuse from the wind industry on roads. And that's because of the weight, that's because of, and the other thing is they're spread out. You know, solar, you're talking, even if you're talking 1,000 acres, it's all continuous, or darn close to it. That's why they're looking up in my neck of the woods, is there's a main transmission line, and they managed to secure a bulk of the acreage of a family farm that's right underneath that transmission line. So they have access to that entry point to the system, like Trent said, for being able to produce that. And so then they just radiate out from there to find out how many acres they can pick up that's all continuous. They'll have to do permits through us for crossing the right of way with, utility lines for transporting that. That's really pretty minor stuff, to be honest with you. That can all be dealt with. So.
Just as a side, I mean, like I said, they actually, the one we're specifically referencing, I mean, they met with me, we're asking questions. They like to be, this is all what they say, so you never know, but they like to be transparent. They don't wanna try and be sneaky about it. They don't wanna make people mad, they wanna have a good reputation. They said they work in counties that are zone on zone. They would do things like bonds, decommissioning plans, work with the roadway department, all these things up front, but they say that, but you don't know. So that's, to me, it's where you get something in writing.
Well, to some extent, they don't want to invest somewhere that they can't play by whatever rules they're gonna have to play by. So, I mean, there's some business side to that, and, I asked some of the questions, the landowners still, I mean, if you drive by the one in Wapello, you don't know what in the world they'd ever do with it, but theoretically, they can still use that land.
With the windmill there.
Well, no, with solar.
Really?
I mean, the windmill, obviously, they just buy they buy an easement out to the windmill. I don't know if they own it, I'm assuming that's also easement. And then they have a circle around the base of the windmill, if you've ever seen those, and that's basically what they have rights to. And the farmer just farms around it. But the solar, supposedly there's, the landowner I spoke with had actually done research to continuing uses that they could possibly use. You can graze it, for instance, but there's only certain animals you can graze because cattle rub against the base of the panels and move them. Goats jump up on the panels and damage them. I'm serious, this is a conversation.
I'm sure
So sheep were a possibility. The problem is you gotta have enough forage there for sheep to eat, and from what I see at the Wapello one, I just don't know how much is there to actually eat.
It looks like they have paths down between each row.
Yeah, I mean, it's a grid,
Yeah.
but point being is they do retain use, but they're not allowed to do anything on that ground that damages or potentially damages the solar panels, obviously, so.
How far off the ground are they?
Turkey farm.
I don't,
10 foot or 9
I
They didn't look very high.
I go that high.
well, if goats are jumping on them, they can't be too high. I don't know.
You underestimate the
I will say.
That's my fault.
I got knuckles, got
Yeah.
goats, you vastly underestimate how high.
Thank you for correcting me, Colin.
That's on me, that's on me.
All of it, oh man, it was a mess.
Well, so,
I would think that we would want to have an ordinance. Des Moines County tried countywide zoning, what's it been, 15, 20 years ago?
yeah.
No, it's been longer than that.
There was no
It's been longer
appetite
than
for it
that.
at all.
Yeah.
We've had,
Terry
the,
must
we've
have
had,
been involved in
we've
that.
had the 2 mile ordinance for 23 years
Yeah,
now.
and that's when they
So-
tried it. So, I mean, I don't see why it couldn't be a standalone countywide ordinance. I
Yeah.
mean, our floodplain is, or our subdivision is.
I agree with that concept.
Yeah, that's fine, I think that's the way to go, it's
Yeah.
just, if somebody did challenge it in the future, it may
Well,
be
then you find
questionable,
out.
but
But at least you
you
can
run
say
into
it
that
covers the whole
when it
county
happens.
and not just
But
one.
Well,
that's-
the key thing about floodplain though is that it's targeted to specific things that are being regulated. It's not saying you can build here but not there. It's based on the elevation of the land and specifically tied to, and then, I mean, those ordinances are based on a template that goes through DNR and FEMA, where this is how these are supposed to be regulated. You don't just arbitrarily come up with things like setback and things that aren't expressly related to flood-proofing a property. So that's why looking at, if we are gonna regulate something like this, it's what types of things are specific to that type of operation that are important to regulate from the county's perspective, just in terms of basic protection of the public interest.
Well, beyond the roads and the cleaning up after a solar installation, I guess the things I've read about, people, when I haven't talked to them, that be next to a windmills, they don't like the noise, they don't like the shadows, or some houses, if it's in the shadow and you get the fan, which I'm sure would get old quickly, and some things like that. That you would address, I suppose, with setbacks or.
Well, yeah, that
that's
is
kind of the
directly
general
tied to
idea.
something like that, that it's protecting of a specific phenomena.
And
And then you're into, you know, and I understand, then you're into that saying, somebody else said, I don't want it there at all, somebody said 50 foot away, and the guy that owns it said, it's my property. I own it. That's what are the downsides to being close to a solar array? And I guess I don't know if there are any, or I'm not familiar with, haven't heard any
Just a
about those.
visual, you don't like it, maybe
Unless-
sun reflection.
Unless your neighbor's got goats.
Potentially noise. Yeah, I don't know, potentially noise from, some of the,
I mean,
the
the fact
infrastructure
is,
they've
there's
got
a
in there.
massive one on the edge of Wapello.
Yeah.
So if there was a noise issue, you would have thought
Yeah.
that'd
Yeah,
made
somebody-
the paper by now.
Yeah.
We've had some 70-mile-per-hour wind.
There's kind of two major designs for those. One being what we're talking about, just a field full of solar panels. The other ones being these arrays of mirrors going back to a handful of solar panels. And that there's significant issues with the array of mirrors as far as people coming close to them, looking at them because of the light.
Brightness.
The brightness, fire issues,
I don't think
all
those
of
are
that.
feasible here.
But as far as what we're talking about are all, at least envisioning when it's up in Wampalo, this field of solar panels.
And we had one person call and complain about a potential, it was in a different area, but hearing the similar things, people signing leases, and they were just concerned about visual appearance in their backyard,
Yeah.
not wanting it there,
Yeah.
the look of it.
The sea of gray.
Yeah.
That's what my wife was complaining the first time she noticed them, she came over the hill there,
It looks like, it looks like the river.
just south,
It
yeah,
does.
it was just
Exactly.
she,
You feel like you're alone.
that's where she grew up, she thought it was ugly.
I will, the part of the land they tried to get, and as far as I know they didn't, was straight across from me to the west. And I sat there and wondered, what's that gonna be like in the evening when the sun's going down with that again, there's this private property thing, and I'm a huge private property supporter. So where's this line, where's that balance? But I personally I've thought about this because it's hitting really close to home.
Do those things, and I guess I'm under the impression that there's like a little swivel, you know, so as the sun goes from the east to the west, that those panels just sort of during the day, is that how they work?
I know some of the smaller ones do that, I don't know if all the larger
I
ones
think
do or
these
not.
big ones
Depends
are
on the
fixed.
mount, some of them are just fixed, and there are some that will turn with
Rotate with the sun.
Yeah,
On
rotate.
a large scale, I haven't seen any
It
that
depends
rotate
on
or
what.
Yeah,
which
the
one.
Wapello ones look fixed.
How about
What
the
I
ones
saw.
out here at
At least
the
some of them.
hospital are fixed, aren't they?
The ones at the hospital are fixed.
Yeah.
Like the ones that
The ones
at
at the hospital
Notre
are
Dame are
identical to the
also
ones at Notre
fixed.
Dame, which are identical to the ones on top of those roofs at SCC. In fact, I think it was the same company that did Notre Dame's and SCC. I don't think they did
We're,
hospitals though.
Trent, maybe you can ask this in a little out of it, but, like I said, everybody's concerned that those solar panels get dumped in the ditches. And some of them are be coming to the end of their useful life here in the next few years. What's the penalty for, if I go out and dump my trash in your ditch? And I've got all these envelopes, Tom Broker there. So the sheriff tracks me down, and I know they have me go out and clean it up. But I mean, is it in there that said, you know, a $500 fine or 30 days in jail or something like that?
I don't know, because I don't know if I've ever seen a ticket written for dumping in the right of way.
When I was a young E4, we're talking long, many moons ago, we lived in the country. My roommates took the garbage out. We had like one place to get the garbage out. This is in North Carolina, and it was open a couple of hours during the day. So Amber had to get the trash there during the day when we're gone soldiering. And anyways, one day she didn't make it. Tried to throw it over the top, and so that literally happened to me. Not with just with regular trash, right? And so I get called in to this federal agency for environmental stuff, and they've got a $10,000 fine for somebody, and I'm like, well, crap, that's almost more than I'm making a year, you know, at the time. And they're like, well, it was out there at the landfill, or there's this little spot there. But anyways, and I'm like, I'm not even the one that takes out the trash. I think that's somebody, but I was able to work it out, but that was just 10,000 alone, just for regular, one bag of regular garbage like that. So and they worked it out, and I had to do community service, whatever. But, I imagine there's a pretty steep fine for that, because at that point, you're talking hazmat.
Well, and that's what I was curious, if there's a different rule, for hazardous materials. Of course, wooden computer screens and televisions and stuff like that, don't they have some of that stuff in them, or not so much, or?
Depends on what's classified. California changed it from hazardous to universal. I was just kind of reading a little bit of it. So Washington State, they have some sort of deal as far as a recycling, not ordinance, but Washington State's kind of the only one in the country, I think, that has something that they have to recycle the solar panels.
Well, what
So
I've heard,
just throwing them in the dump.
what I've heard about the wind industry is that they can't figure out how to economically deal with the blades. They didn't realize that the blades were gonna fall apart and deteriorate as fast as they could. And I saw a wind blade in 3 pieces running down a highway on a flatbed here about 3 or 4 weeks ago across the 4-lane. I've heard that they just went down and bought land in Missouri, and that they're just stockpiling on what was private land. I don't know that to be fact, but where I'm going with that is, I have an experience from Monroe County. Monroe County, where I came from, was a fully zoned county. Countywide, had a zoning administrator, was all the way through. In fact, I sat in, we rewrote the zoning code while I was there. Before I got there, one of the reasons they were very supportive of that was because somebody took their farm, and Monroe County is a low land quality type of county. I mean, it's a lot more pasture related than it is high row crop type thing. Somebody took their farm and tried to start their own landfill. And the county fought a multi-year, multi-million-dollar lawsuit and won, or sued, perhaps is a better way to put it, because they stopped it through and then maybe they got sued. I don't remember the dynamics. It was, the tail end of it was when I was starting. So point being is what goes through my head is when, this, in my political head, this is a bit of a government-funded land grab in my political head. It's kind of like the conversation of the environmentalists wanting to cut the levee and flood the bottoms because it doesn't matter, who cares about the farmers down there? The river's more important, kind of a thing. In this case, what's to stop somebody that's throwing that kind of money at somebody to take their land out of production to go buy the neighboring farm at any point during this process? There's somebody that's willing to sell it and just start stacking these babies up and saying, we'll get to them whenever the technology comes around, or we can afford it, or, basically becoming an on-site stacking landfill. I know that's outside a little bit what we're talking about, but I might do a little bit more digging to find out what the wind industry is really doing, because I suspect that's probably a model if it's not economical, because these things aren't gonna, the same solar panels going in now are not gonna be the solar panels sitting there in 50 years. There's no way they have that life. No way.
Well, the technology drastically changes on the panels themselves too. So
Yeah,
they may
so-
find out in 10 years, it's better for us to change these out with
Yeah,
these
there's
new
gotta be a
panels
life
than
cycle
panels.
cost where they assume they're gonna put new panels in there at some point.
And I would think they would be federally regulated too on what they can do with those.
I don't know, depending on the administration, they're pretty much in love with anything with the word green. I don't know how much regulation there.
But
You
there's
can call
still
somebody the renewable, but if it's using resources that aren't renewable, maybe the sunlight's renewable or the wind's renewable, but the resources you use to collect that power, those aren't renewable. Some of them are really expensive, but actually the solar panels, which have nothing to do with our discussion, a great many of those are produced with slave labor. Because that's where some of those rare earth minerals come from, is that province in China where they have the camps for the Uyghurs. And there's a country in Africa, I don't remember which one, uses slave labor and child labor to run those mines.
But then again, so are these, and we're all carrying these.
Oh, I'm saying it doesn't have
everything you got.
Discussion with this.
Gold,
We aren't holding this,
crazy things
we aren't
about
holding this
child
up
labor.
to demonstrate, say, we're not virtue signaling by using our cell phone. But if we said, well, we want windmills,
that's a different deal.
I
Everybody knows
mean,
what those
I'm
things are.
looking at it from the perspective of, I mean, this is coming. Solar and wind is going to be, I mean, it's only just been within the last 2 or 3 years that, you know, across the board, solar production now beats coal as far as total cost. And so we're only on the front edge of this, and yeah, the technology's gonna change, but I mean, look at what we were carrying in our pockets just 10 years ago. compared to what it is
It's
now.
only coming because they're trying to eliminate nuclear.
Be that as it may, it's still coming. I mean,
Well,
it's
but
a feasible alternative.
nuclear's the cheapest, safest energy you can get.
Sure, but there's still byproduct to that.
Yeah, a small
And so,
byproduct that
you know,
doesn't
we've gotta-
touch the
We've
rest
gotta
of
put
it.
that somewhere, and so, I mean, there isn't gonna be one silver bullet to changing our industry, our energy profile. And so, we can't begin to predict what the technology is going to be 25 and 30 and 50 years from now in any of these. And so, I mean, we can only go off of the information that we have now, but a lot of this is just conjecture. I mean, we're only at the front end of this technology, and, you know, I can't begin to predict.
The
And we're on the
technology
front
we
end
have
of
is what,
regulation of it as
it's
well.
what the federal government decides they want, because that's what they will subsidize and permit.
Well, sure, but I mean, but they're also subsidizing a lot of agriculture, and.
Subsidizing a lot of everything.
Yeah, and so, and that
Let's
could change
rewind
in
it.
3.5 years.
I think we're in a little bit of field of where we're
Yes,
at.
yes.
Yeah, we're
As
Digression, you mean?
Thanks,
far
Trent.
as, you bet.
We could
As
stick
far
our
as-
head into the sand that this isn't gonna happen, but it's gonna happen. so.
Right, but as far as saying it's a new industry, it might be newly industrialized, but we're not dealing with super brand new technology.
Sure.
When we're talking about the recycle costs and the ramifications of that. There's other organizations, other cities, counties that have ordinances out there we can look at for dealing with these backside costs, which is truly what we're talking about. That's the $60 million question, right? How do we protect ourselves? Because you're right to say that the industrialization of this technology is just now starting to happen, and some places are gonna say, hey, come one, come all, do what you may, to heck with what happens 50 years down the road, and we can do that. That's always easy to do, right? Or we could say, hey, we're welcome to have you, but we know that this is gonna cost X, Y, or Z at least 10, 20 years, you know, and how do we protect ourselves from that? What is the exit strategy? And I think that's what you three are asking for, right? Is for us to produce something that protects us from the utility company that goes under and/or says, okay, we're gonna go ahead and take these solar panels out of commission now because they're no longer generating enough power to be cost effective, and do they just walk away from this lease, and we have a county full of property that's, needs to be rehabilitated before it's an actual asset. What's that?
Untaxable.
Yeah, untaxable, yeah.
That's where I am. I don't know what these, that, you just spoke to me right on.
Yeah, so that's the concern, and I think we can address that in the ordinance.
And I agree, but that's a serious concern. The other is the old, you know, what are my rights as a property owner? What are your rights as my neighbor? How close, where can you, you know, I wanna put solar panels or windmill here. I don't want you to put solar panels or a windmill there. You need to put it over here. And
That's called not in my backyard.
that's called.
That's what you guys get paid.
That's the nitty part of it.
People that put up hog buildings don't put them up by their own house.
No, they don't.
So, I mean, there's this great balance. It's interesting to me, because I am a big property rights person. So it's kind
And that's
of,
why people move out to the county, man, you know what I'm saying? They get out of the city, they move out further outside of city limits so that they can,
yep, and then the only time they
Do
call
their
back is when they want you to do something about their neighbor.
or when they went,
I want
when they
this
went
freedom.
concrete.
I don't want my neighbor to have that freedom.
Brian, it's dusty out here, can you clean my road?
Now you're no.
Yeah. Snowplows
Oh,
haven't been out.
just to be clear, make sure I got, because I didn't come here to debate
Yeah,
what the
I-
best energy sources are and all those things. We just have kind of some impending things that we're hearing about, could be happening, looking for direction. So I think what I'm hearing though is, because right now we do have something in the 2-mile zoning ordinance as the draft, but we want to be clear when we come forward. I think what I'm hearing is we should try to develop something countywide. Wind and a solar, is that what we're thinking, or just solar?
They would be
or-
together,
So-
they're different, right?
Whether it would be one
I don't know
ordinance
if
or
it,
two
I don't know if it makes sense
ordinances.
to do one or two separate ones. I guess we could talk about that with Trent a little bit maybe, but,
There would be some similar
But I think
concerns,
the
and some of them different.
right, so I think and they're two different, while they're renewable systems, they are different types of systems, so I think they might be
One
a
of us
little
are
bit.
concerned for the road,
I'd rather
the transportation, the roads,
Right.
and that sort of thing.
So-
The equipment on it.
So I just wanna make sure that I'm hearing the guys correct, and I think what we would do then is we'd take it out of the 2-mile, cause then it'd still be regulated within a 2-mile if it's countywide. So I think am I hearing the direction correctly?
For a starting point.
For a start, yeah, I think
Right.
we will have a draft and it will be
No, I
reviewed,
think
it'll go
that's-
to departments
I
and all
think-
those things. I'm not getting into the
I
details
would say
today.
they're so different. I mean, unless Trent says it matters one way or the other, which I'd have to defer to the legal side of it. To me, having them separate, because one takes up literally square miles and square miles and square miles in wind, and one takes up chunk of acreage. I mean, to me, they have a different impact and different square footage in different area, but either way, if we want to address them, I'd say it's a good place to start, because they are coming, I agree with that.
And one other quick thing as a side note from the company that did stop by, they said the timeline on these things, I mean, they're talking about easements today for the environmentalists, they said from today till like a wind farm, it's at least 3 years.
Yeah, they told
Before
me.
you, so I mean, there's a ton of lead time on these things, so it's not, they said it's not gonna be like it's out there next year. I
They
mean,
told the
it's-
landowner
it's
that
a-
she'd know within 3 years,
Yeah,
whether they
I
were
mean-
gonna advance on the big part of the lease or not.
So there's a lot of regulation on the distribution of power and all those things you have to go through to take, and then the environmental of placing the panels and stuff that just takes a ton of time, so.
We would also want to check on, like Brian said, that there's zero property taxes, but then there's some sort of a backfill from the state. So if there's anything we would need to address.
I wondered if
Why
Warner would
is there
have
a property
something.
tax? I don't understand that.
I can't speak intelligently about it. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
we'll have to do
because
some
of the push
research
for
on that
green.
separately.
I don't, that's an assumption, I don't know. I thought maybe Matt might have some connections on something
Yeah, I think
like
that's
that.
Matt.
It's gotta be an assessment conversation, doesn't it, at some point?
Well,
I don't know.
and I thought maybe that there was some sort of a state
Well,
state
you're,
has law that says, you know, that if you get solar, we're gonna backfill their property. And possibly something like that would need to be addressed in the ordinance, if that's. how it
I'm
works. I have no
happy
idea.
to try to find a state office somewhere. I gotta believe if it's a zero thing, it's not because the Loiza County waived it. So it would have to be, I mean, seriously, so I gotta believe it's a
Yeah, that
state
sounds
office.
kinda
If
weird,
it's
but-
true, I gotta believe it's coming from the state level.
So we can do some research. I mean, if you wanna reach out to some people, we can ask Matt, we can reach out to,
I can try to figure out some
there's an
stuff.
office, I
Matt
forget what
ought
it's Office of Energy, something like that. Can't
Matt
remember
ought
what
to
it
be
is,
plugged into anything the state's doing.
I mean, that's what, I would think
So
that
we'll do some
Matt could
research.
call
No,
the
that I
Loiza
think
County
that's
assessor
what it
and know almost immediately how those are handled, and wind has been around more actively than solar has, and wind has been around actively for a little while now, so it's not like this is a new, like Trent said, this isn't a new dynamic. I gotta believe there's a playbook out there for that side of things. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it would be.
Well, what I've learned from this conversation so far, you young people buy a house and put solar on your house, you better sell the damn thing in 20 years.
Before the roof, before the.
Brian, there's a house there on
Before you have to get rid of the solar panel.
You can say that about a lot of things.
Well, if it's
I
only
guess.
got-
There's
That's
that
why
might
the
be
people
more
got into
expensive.
solar when
You
they
said
were-
that about a roof, you said about a furnace in there, you said about your window, you said about anything.
Well, now what you just said, maybe.
What?
Gotta have that-
Yeah, I got out before I started fixing it. So I bought a house where I got to
It
fix
wouldn't be
everything.
a big huge deal, you know, on somebody's
It's the
house.
same, It may be more expensive, but, you know, you gotta replace a roof or a window or whatever.
That's true, that's true. Yeah, I wouldn't know that whatever we're doing to affect,
But yeah.
you know, some farmer that wants to put
That
it
would be a guy
goes
out
out
for
and
it.
wants to put it on his.
You're smart,
on his
first
house,
step.
his garage,
If
something like
there
that.
is something it takes from zero.
As long as he doesn't throw
I
it in the
feel it's
Thank
like
you
every-
guys.
Pretty big difference when somebody wants to throw fuel at his
That's how I
house.
see it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I feel like I said, if you have 30, you got 10, that's
Maybe that's a bit of
$300.
a,
And, but
if there's a way to look at it,
It's more
that's
work
my
to do.
suggestion.
You're like, oh, great.
Agriculture.
Okay, are we done?
I think
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a lot to go over, so.
It's good, it's good stuff.
We'll keep you up to date on the road, so we're gonna work with Trent on communication and
Right on,
It's
right
always
on.
10.
what we need to do with them, and then